Forget pass catchers and pass rushers. Let's make the case for Toledo cornerback Quinyon Mitchell, the best pass coverer in the 2024 NFL Draft.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of the Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. So, guys, if you don't know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Mr. Drew, a.k.a. Sirius Black, a.k.a. the Jolly Green Giant, a.k.a. the iron that sharpens the iron, a.k.a. Mr. a.k.a. And I thank each and every one of you that is an everydayer of this podcast that makes it your first listen, first watch of the day. All you got to do to become an everydayer is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So today's episode, I am joined by Kenny G, a.k.a. Grits Blitz on Twitter, who covers the Falcons for the Sporting News. And we're going to talk about the case for Quinyon Mitchell in round one. And if that leaves the Falcons potentially, lacking in terms of their pass rush on day two. And we'll also talk about some of the day two options that Kenny has his eyes on that he would love to see in a Falcons uniform. And we'll get into that conversation right now. All right, everyone. Welcome back to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, joined by an illustrious guest. He is Kenny G, one of the latest contributors to the Sporting News, covering the Falcons, making his triumphant second appearance on the pod. I think we last had you on in 2022, so it's been quite some time. But Kenny, my friend, welcome back to the show.
Aaron, how you doing? Thanks for having me, man. Yeah, it was a lot's changed since then, so should be fun.
Yeah, definitely. So let's jump right into it. I've been pushing pretty hard on the Falcons kind of needing to take a pass rusher in round one if they want to have any semblance of a real pass rush in the 2024 season. But I also know you're a big fan of some of the cornerbacks, I should say, at the top of this draft. And that seems to be the most popular alternative for the Falcons in round one, if you don't count an offensive skill position player, as the Falcons so often like to do with these top 10 picks. But I guess, can you make the case for why a corner may make sense over a pass rusher in the top of the round one? And is there a particular guy that you like more than the others?
Yes to both. So when you look at the team needs for the Falcons, edge rusher is the obvious one. And I mean, it feels like it's going to be that way till the end of the time at this rate. We haven't had a double-digit sack artist since Vic Beasley in 2016. And I think he actually led the NFL in sacks that year as well, which is just hilarious to me. But yeah, corner is right there with edge rusher, in my opinion. Now, I know it may not seem that way to a few people, but I mean, if you look at our depth chart, I mean, the only people you can really count on is AJ Terrell, of course, but he's yet to sign an extension, and Clark Phillips. But I mean, while I enjoyed some of the flashes he showed as a rookie, he could be a limited player, and I don't think it's smart to roll him out there with no plan B heading into this year. And if you also look at who's under contract after this year, Clark Phillips is the only cornerback we have that's under contract in 2025 and beyond. So I think we need to attack the position and not just add one guy, but hopefully multiple guys in this draft. As far as prospect fits go, there is one guy that stands above all the others to me, and that's Toledo cornerback Quinyon Mitchell. I believe that Quinyon Mitchell is another great scheme fit for what we believe Raheem Morris and Jimmy Lake will like to do. So at Toledo, their defensive coordinator, his name's escaping me right now, he ran a ton of zone coverage, which we believe that we're going to do as well. Raheem Morris ran a ton of cover three, a ton of quarters, a ton of cover six, and Mitchell was asked to do many of those same things in college, and he excelled at it. So I believe that the fit is there, and I also think the talent lines up as well. You couldn't really ask for a player to ace the pre-draft process better than Quinyon Mitchell has. He was arguably the best player at the Senior Bowl. He went to the Combine, and he put up stellar athletic testing numbers. he doesn't really have many red flags in his profile, sans level of competition, which, not everyone buys into. But when he did play good competition, I thought he did well. So I really believe that Quinyon Mitchell would be an excellent selection for the Atlanta Falcons at 8th overall.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think you're right on the nailing the pre-draft process. I got to see him at the Senior Bowl. I hadn't really watched him prior to going down to Mobile. I had heard of him because people were like, "Oh, you got to watch this, guy from the MAC or whatever." And then he went out, and I would basically push the narrative that he was the best player in Mobile that week. And we talk a lot in previous years about, top 10 corners tend to look and move and test a certain way, big, long, strong, fast, all that sort of thing. And, he went to the combine and showed that he was all those things. So I think that's definitely true. And then you talk about the quality of competition. He did get one game against Marvin Harrison Jr. in 2022. I wouldn't say he won that matchup. I don't know if anybody's won a matchup against Marvin Harrison Jr. The last couple of years, but I think you can make an argument that he fared better in that matchup than a lot of other corners have that are also, especially guys that are, potentially top 50 picks. We talked a little bit about Kamari Lassiter on yesterday's Locked On Falcons. And it wasn't that pretty for him and Keely Ringo in that national title game going up against Marvin Harrison Jr. And I would argue Mitchell did better than either one of those two guys did in that matchup. So you're right. I think Mitchell checks a lot of the boxes. So my follow-up question is, do you think sticking and picking at 8 makes sense if the Falcons want to go Mitchell? Or do you feel like it's more likely if they do pull the trigger on a corner that's part of maybe a mini trade back, moving back 2, 3 or more spots and getting one of those corners?
I think it's more possible than a lot of people believe it to be that they'll just stick at 8 and end up picking the top guy on their board, who could be Mitchell. Ideally, because, you spoke yesterday on how Terry Fontenot kind of lines up with consensus, and Mitchell is like generally, I see him anywhere from 10 to 15 these days. So ideally, you'd want to trade back and gain some value and then pick them. Everyone wants to have their cake and eat it too. But I don't know if the offers will be there. It seems like we're kind of in a position where, like you said, the Jets and the Bears would want to move up, but they don't really have the capital to do it. I don't see Denver moving up, and I don't think a quarterback will be there for him. So I really believe that we're going to end up staying at 8 and taking the guy we like the most there. Although I would be a fan of a trade down. I would much prefer that.
Yeah, I'm the same way. It felt towards the end of March, early April, that a trade down looked real possible. But as this thing is kind of worn on, I kind of agree with you. It's just, you just wonder, okay, what is the team that's going to want to come up? And
like Minnesota maybe, but you think they'd move much higher than 8th overall to get the guy they're targeting.
Yeah, I would assume so as well. So we'll see. I think really the best possibility is one of those teams move back with Minnesota, and then, whoever is now picking at 11, whether it's, Arizona or the Chargers, wants to move back up for probably one of the receivers if that guy is there. That seems still to me to be the best case scenario for the Falcons trading back. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, we're counting on Monty Ossenfort to work them phones,
Yeah, I hear you. So if the Falcons, whether they stick and pick or trade back and get Quinyon Mitchell, what does that mean for how the Falcons can address the pass rush? We'll break that down here with Kenny G, Sporting News, on today's Locked On Falcons. So guys, today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. And now that spring is here, it's the time to be social and spontaneous. And, you got to figure out what is the right type of socializing for you. How do you recharge? Right? Are you the type of person that thrives around people, or you need some of that alone time? And therapy can give you the self-awareness to build a social life that doesn't drain your battery. But therapy has benefited me. BetterHelp has benefited me. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, I cannot recommend enough to give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, suited to your schedule. All you got to do is fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist quickly. and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find your social sweet spot with BetterHelp by visiting betterhelp.com/lockedon today, and you'll get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. So before we continue this conversation about what the Falcons can do to address their pass rush on day 2 of the draft, I do want to plug the Locked On NFL Mock Draft live this Wednesday, April 17th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, streaming on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel right here on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channel app. It's the ultimate 6-episode series beginning April 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, where you're going to get the lowdown on myself, as well as the other local experts here on the Locked On Falcons, the Locked On Podcast Network, as well as local college football experts and even some fantasy football stuff. So check out the Locked On NFL Mock Draft, April 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern, streaming live on Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. So, Kenny, let's talk more about how the Falcons can solve their pass rush issues on day 2 of the draft if they go in a different direction in round 1. And for me, part of this conversation is, and part of the reason why I'm so gung-ho on maybe taking a pass rusher in round 1 is because the perceived drop-off from the talent in terms of pass rushers, especially at the edge rushing position, from day 1 to day 2, after you get past the top 3 guys, which is Dallas Turner of Alabama, Jared Verse of Florida State, and Laiatu Latu of UCLA. And it's not to say that the rest of the edges are going to be bad NFL players, but let's say if you take edge 4 through 15 and you have roughly a dozen guys, there's odds are that at least one of those guys is going to turn into a good pro in the NFL. But to me, that's like a 1 in 12 shot. And even if you think the odds of one of the top 3 guys turning into an impact player is 1 in 3, basically that's telling you that the chances of hitting on one of those top 3 guys is 4 times higher than, waiting in the draft. But when you talk about a team like Atlanta, as you mentioned earlier, like they're constantly looking for edge rush help. And, you look at that 1 in 3 chance, that's pretty risky. That's not like a high hit rate or anything. And I think that's part of the reason why, people can look at alternative options in round 1, maybe a corner, maybe a wide receiver. You have a higher chance of hitting on that player in terms of best player available. But, I do think part of that is there's a lot more risk involved with waiting. But that being said, that's my opinion on the situation. What is yours when it comes to the Falcons' ability to still find value in terms of their pass rush on day 2?
Like you said, there's going to be value somewhere, but I have little confidence that we'd be able to find it. When I break down this class, I'm in lockstep with you in that there's the big 3 edge rushers and then a sharp drop off in talent. Well, not talent, but in caliber of prospect from that point on. So let's assume that we go pass catcher or corner in round 1, and we're sitting there at round 2, 43 overall, and trying to see who the best guy that can rush the passer is. I'm not confident in any of the guys there. I mean, Marshawn Nealon's a name that's been getting a lot of steam lately. I don't know if he's going to be able to do a lot of the things we're going to ask him to do. I think he's more of a base end. I don't like him in a 2-point stance. I question some of his movement skills, although he is a good athlete. But so I wouldn't be confident picking him there and putting the expectations to be a full-time starter off rip on his shoulders. I'm curious about Chop Robinson. I think he could come in as a DPR and add juice to the room in that regard immediately. But one, I don't know if he makes it to 43. Although in your mock draft, I saw that I believe he slid down to 50 or something when you were doing yours yesterday. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was surprised at that. But, I mean, I think he's the only guy that we could, take with our second pick in the draft, and I would feel, have some confidence in. And even then, like I said, he'd have to be brought along as a DPR, and that would mean you're starting Ebiketie and Carter out there. I just don't see a pat. Like, that's what makes it tricky, right? We talk about BPA and everything, but this offseason more than others, we're kind of backed into a corner where we have to address pass rush round 1 if we're going to get a high caliber guy.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. And with my mock draft having Chop fall, it was kind of my own sort of bias kind of filtering in on there. It's like, I don't love any of these edges. And I had Nealon going 32 to the Chiefs. So it was like, after that point, it was just like, all right, and I think you're right. I like Nealon a lot. I would love him even more if Ryan Nielsen was still here, because it feels like that would be the type of player that Ryan Nielsen, would go crazy for. But I think now with, new DC, Jimmy Lake and Raheem Morris, that they're looking for more of the type of rusher that we have with Ebiketie and D'Angelo Malone under Dean Pease. And, I think if the Falcons, this is the conversation, I guess, where if they don't get that pass rusher in round one, you're putting a big bet on Ebiketie and D'Angelo Malone making a big leap. And I'm just curious for your mind, how confident are you that either one of those two guys can maybe take the edge off when it comes to, pun intended, the Falcons pass rush this year?
So I haven't given up on Arnold Ebiketie. I want to put that out there right now. I think that Malone as well, they've been hurt by the scheme changes since they've gotten drafted. That's where lack of continuity amongst the coaching staff can really hurt a player's development, asking them to do different things every year. But I think Ebiketie can be a good NFL player, a solid starter for us. I don't know if he'll ever be that double-digit sack guy, but I think we can get a lot of production out of him. He can be a plus player. D'Angelo Malone, we really haven't gotten an opportunity to see much out of him since Dean Pease left. I don't think you can count on him. I think he'll be better this year for some of the same reasons Ebiketie will. He'll be able to showcase his speed a little more. He'll be able to do things that he's more comfortable with. But neither of those guys is going to be – this is the first thing that comes to mind. I hate to use it, but none of them are Batman. They both seem more like supporting cast, Robins, maybe Nightwing. Shoot, I don't know. But we need a Batman. We need an alpha. We need a guy who, when it's 3rd and 8, he's going to go out there and he's going to get a pressure. He's going to affect the play. And we need defenses to game plan for those guys so the other guys can eat too. So rolling out with those two for the season, while I haven't fully given up on them, I'm not comfortable with that either. If we don't get an edge in the draft in round one, we really need to explore all options to add to the room.
Yeah. And what are those options? Is that free agency? It's a pretty thin crop after the draft. Mm-hmm. Is that, maybe getting somebody on a trade or something like that? Do you have any targets in mind when you say that?
Not really. I was looking at some potential trade candidates that we could add to the edge room if we don't select one. And I came up with Trey Hendrickson, but I think the Bengals are in like win now mode, obviously. So I don't think they'd be willing to move him, but he is in a contract year, I believe. And I think he'd be a guy who theoretically could be available, because that's what you look for when you're looking for potential trade candidates, people in contract years or no longer a scheme fit, something like that. But no one else comes to mind immediately. The options are bare, We could maybe add a player like Carl Lawson to the room. I know that his best ball was a few years ago, but I would really love an addition like that. I think that if there wasn't a star or an impact player that we could trade for, which they're more likely than not won't be because it's edge rusher and they're hard to find, then we would have to attack it with numbers, just keep adding to the room and to see if we can get a hit and kind of go about it in that fashion.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So we'll see what the Falcons do, but we will turn the page from looking at pass rushers on day 2 and look at some other day 2 options that Kenny likes in this draft for the Atlanta Falcons to wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. Guys, spring is here, and that means baseball is back. And again, it's time to be spontaneous, right? You sit there and you want to take advantage of this beautiful spring weather wherever you may find yourself out there. And, baseball's on every single day. So you can sit there and you're like, it's a beautiful day. Let's go down to the park, whether it's minor league, major league, and get us a hot dog and watch some baseball. And Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, which is going to make getting tickets in your spontaneity be even easier. They got killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, the lowest price guarantee. They're taking the guesswork out of buying tickets, and they even, have prices that go down the closer you get to the first pitch. So take that guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So we talked about some of the limited options in terms of pass rushers that could be available for the Falcons on day 2, but who are some guys that are not so limited that you like for the Falcons there with 3 picks on day 2 in rounds 2 and 3 that really, we spend so much time talking about the first round pick because that's the one that gets the headlines, but the thing that kind of makes and breaks your draft is your ability to hit on some of those mid and later round picks. And so, who are some guys that you would at least go into the draft or coming out of the draft think could potentially be some of those hits on day 2?
So assuming good defense in some capacity around 1, this wide receiver class is pretty strong. And I think that 43 is like the perfect spot to grab somebody who could contribute immediately. I have 2 names for you that I don't think have been spoken about on this podcast. Yeah, I could be mistaken, but, every day or usually I listen and everything. So, all right. So we got Ricky Pearsall out of Florida. I really like his game. They call him Slick Rick for a reason because he's slick in his route running. He's very nuanced. He does everything with good tempo. He tested as an explosive athlete, 4'4", 140, 42-inch vert. I think he might have the best hands in this draft class. I mean, the guy catches everything. He had a real spectacular one-handed catch against Charlotte that went viral. I'm sure if you know anything about him, that was probably your first thing you've seen. He really excelled against man coverage specifically at UF, and he did so by running a lot of in-breaking routes, which I think meshes very well with Kirk Cousins' game right there. I think he could come in and he could be a reliable chain mover opposite Drake London. And I think that would contribute, greatly to the offense and our ability to move the ball down the field. He's generally in the right spot at the right time. And I think that, the chemistry would be instant with Kirk. And he's a guy that can line up all over. He's probably his best tape comes in the slot, but I don't think he's limited to just there. And Florida used him in a way where he was deployed everywhere. So I really like Ricky Pearsall, probably somewhere around pick 43. I think that's where he's projected to go as well. So there's one name that I could really see us selecting and fitting in immediately.
Is there anybody else? I know you had a couple of names. You can go right on.
Yeah, you got it. All right, second guy, another wide receiver. I'm a big fan of Ja'Lynn Polk, man. I am. I feel like he's, some people are lower on him. Dane had him much lower than I expected him to be in the beast, but I really enjoy Ja'Lynn Polk's game. He's well-rounded. He's got good size. He's measured in at 6'1", 200 pounds. He plays even bigger. And his body control and hand-eye coordination are up there amongst the best in the class as well. There's plenty of reps where he's going across the middle and he's off balance or he's diving for a ball. And as soon as it hits his hands, that thing sticks. And I credit it to his coordination. He also lined up all over the formation. So the common theme between him and Pearsall is versatility. He's a plus blocker. He's not afraid to do the dirty work, which every OC loves. And he kind of gave me shades of Robert Woods when I was watching him. There's an X-Ram that you can plug in there. So Ja'Lynn Polk and Ricky Pearsall, 2 pass catchers I'm really excited about targeting. Another guy who has kind of gotten forgotten in the pre-draft process a little bit because he missed the combine is TJ Tampa out of Iowa State. Should we address pass rusher in round 1? He's a guy to be looking at day 2. He's well built with great size, and he played a ton of zone coverage at Iowa State. So a lot of the things that we'd ask him to do, he's already done in college and he's excelled at. So he'd probably be one of my top corner targets. He also, I don't know if the whole wingspan argument extends to players in the secondary with Terry Fontenot. I don't have the numbers on those, but
Clark Phillips kind of throws a wrench in.
Yeah. But he does have long arms. He's got 89th percentile wingspan. So if that's what Terry's looking for in his corners, he fits the bill. Another guy who I really love, this is one of my favorite players in the draft right here, and I'm not trying to, appease to UGA fans, but here we go. I know you got your 2 yesterday, so I'm going to get mine today. I really love Javon Bullard's game, man. I'm a big fan of his. He's a smart player. He's a tough player. He is always in the right spot at the right time. I think that, he would be able to excel playing any kind of shell coverage you want him to. and he fills the lane in the run game with aggression. I think that he could come in and, we got Richie Grant and DeMarco Halems, but Richie's been inconsistent. DeMarco was a real pleasant surprise last year, but I don't know if you can count on him, being able to do have a lot of the responsibilities that we're going to ask him to do. So I think that safety is, very much on the board. I think you had us selecting Tyler Nubin yesterday. I would love that pick as well, but Javon Bullard, for my money, is one of the pound-for-pound best players in this draft, and he won't be selected very high due to, being a safety and a little bit of a weaker class, but he's a guy that I would love to add to the team.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, Bullard kind of solved Georgia's Marvin Harrison problem in that national.
Yeah, some would call it that.
Yeah, so for those that do not recall, he knocked Marvin Harrison out of the game. I think he got ejected for that hit as well for targeting, but he was basically tired of watching Keely Ringo and Kamari Lassiter, struggle. He's like, I'm gonna take matters into my own hands and solve that problem. So, I like that type of mentality. When you're watching, I don't know, Richie Grant get beat by some tight end or whatever, it's like just take them out of the game. But Kenny, is there anybody else on your list of day 2 options that you're looking at?
So I got 2 more names, and they play a position that I don't think a lot of people consider a need, but I do, and that's offensive tackle. While not an immediate need, this is a strong class, and I would love for Terry to take advantage of it. I would love for him to be proactive instead of reactive, not wait till we need a tackle, kind of have a guy waiting in the wings. I've wanted to upgrade at swing for a long time, or a developmental guy, rather. And 2 guys that come to mind for me are Patrick Paul from University of Houston and Blake Fisher from Notre Dame. I think those are guys who could potentially slide towards that, 73 overall, maybe somewhere around there, just due to the strength of the class. And if one of those guys slides there, I would love to get them waiting in the wings. Some may call it a luxury we can't afford because they wouldn't play right away. But for me, the value there would be too good to pass up. Patrick Paul is a mammoth of a man. He's 6'7", 330. He fits the wingspan bill for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah. 96 percentile wingspan. He, like I said, he's a mammoth of a man. He's strong. He's very strong up top. He kind of has a hard time matching his upper half to his lower half when moving, which, that's exactly why sitting a year for him could do wonders for his development. And Blake Fisher is also, good size athlete. He was a team captain. He actually started at left tackle as a freshman. I think it was the first player in Notre Dame to do that. And then he got hurt, and Joe Alt came in and took his job and never looked back. So he was cast over to the right side, but he made a home there. And, I think it's good that he has that kind of versatility. He's a little more finesse, and he also could do with a year of sitting and kind of developing a little bit. So I think those are 2 guys, they have the plush traits. They need a little bit of refinement, and I think that's what makes us an ideal landing spot for them.
Well, you gave a lot of names, a lot of players that you're right, we haven't really touched upon on this podcast. Some of those guys I've watched and I'm fans of. Pearsall, day 1 in Senior Bowl, my reaction was smooth, right? Like, it's very smooth, right? Ja'Lynn Polk, I'm not as high on, right? I'm probably more in that Dane Brugler book when it comes to Ja'Lynn Polk, but I think if you like Ja'Lynn Polk, like, there's a lot of Chris Godwin to his game. Would that be a fair comp for him? So that has intriguing potential, especially here in Atlanta. Hey,
I'd be happy with him in the second. If we want to take him in the third, by all means, let it happen.
There you go. So, Kenny, I really appreciate you joining me and giving your insights into this conversation. We'll see what the Falcons do. Let the people know where they can get further insights from you elsewhere online.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. Always a pleasure to talk ball with you. You guys follow me at Kenny G or at Gritsblitz on Twitter. That's Grits with a Z. I recently began working for the Sporting News, providing Atlanta Falcons content, so I'll be having plenty more of that coming your way as we get closer and closer to the NFL draft.
You guys have it. All right, that's going to do it for us. We'll be back tomorrow with Damian Parson of Locked On NFL Draft giving us his perfect NFL draft for the Atlanta Falcons. So that is definitely in store for you guys. Check out Locked On Sports today for the for their 24/7 streaming channel here on YouTube for the Locked On NFL mock draft on Wednesday, April 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Check out Locked On Sports Atlanta, Locked On NFL Draft, Locked On NFL. It's all part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every